I love gear. I love outdoor gear. I love bags and like harnesses or vests or being in the Marines, we'd have like gear, and all this stuff. And it was kind of, I loved having all that kind of stuff. But I would also love to go to REI and I could go to REI and like feel around the different materials, and I would spend like hours in the backpack section, just feeling the different materials, seeing what this is made out of, seeing what this is made out of. And one of the things I would do is it was kind of a fun exercise that I was doing on my own before I even started learning how to sew. And I was like, okay, I really like this stuff. So, but what I would do is I'd get like 3 of the 75-liter bags, like the big hiking packs. And so to a true hiker, they're gonna look at those 3 bags, and there's gonna be some small element that's gonna make this bag better than this bag, better than this bag. It's usually in these small little details, like maybe it has pockets on the hip belt, or maybe it has like some kind of D-rings right here where you can hang your, it's just like little bitty detail, like having a D-ring right here or pockets here or something that's gonna make this bag stand out to you as opposed to the other bags. But I realized, okay, I want to like do this. I want to like figure out how to do this. And so I was like, I guess I need to learn how to sew.
On this week's episode of Establishing Your Empire, Elliott Weeks. Elliott created the company Old Enfield Supply Co, which sells these really cool travel bags and distressed totes and other gear. And on this episode, we take a deep dive in how Elliott got started from his idea to creating prototypes to the whole manufacturing process. You're listening to the Establishing Your Empire show, a podcast that inspires entrepreneurs, creatives, and future business owners to pursue their passions, grow their organizations, and build their empire. My name is Daran Herrman, and creatively, I'm best known for my photography. But business-wise, my claim to fame is growing a company from $15K per month in online sales to breaking the $1 million a month barrier. And I'm sitting down with interesting people to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how they have established their empires. All right, Elliott. Well, I really appreciate you coming here to be on the podcast.
Yeah, man.
So why don't we start with a little background of who you are and what you do and your story.
Perfect. Okay. Well, my name is Elliott Weeks. I am the founder and CEO of Old Enfield Supply Company. I'm from here in Austin. I grew up in Austin, one of those rare Austinites. So this is my hometown, and I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. After high school, I went in the Marines, and then after the Marines, I went to UT, got a communications degree, and then eventually rolled out into Old Enfield.
And in the Marines, you just reading a little bit about your story. So you were deployed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us any background information on there?
Yeah, sure. So I was an infantry rifleman, and I was stationed out in Hawaii, which I didn't even know the Marines had a base in Hawaii until basically I was getting told that that's where I was going to be. So that was cool. That was really cool to kind of like experience living in Hawaii. I did deploy twice, Afghanistan in 2005, 2006, and Iraq 06, 07. So that's my background with that.
And how long were you deployed for? Was it a long period of time or?
Afghanistan, it was 8 months. And then Iraq was, I think, just about 7 months.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time to be gone. So you go from Austin, Hawaii, you're thinking probably life's pretty grand.
Yeah.
That time period, a lot of conflicts. So, all right. So you come back to town and you went to UT.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of future plans, ideas going on there with you going to UT, or just, hey, I got to get a degree?
No, I had plans. My dad is in kind of advertising space, and I wasn't sure what I want to do, but I've always kind of helped him out here and there. And so I thought I'd do communications. And so I went to UT to get a communications degree, and it was general corporate communication studies. And when I left UT, I was looking for, kind of a first step job. And the Texas Department of Public Safety had a position opening for a digital media person. And it was the first person they've ever hired for this. And so DPS, people usually think of like driver's license or whatever. It actually consists of, like Highway Patrol, Texas Rangers. There's an intelligence unit. There's, all kinds of stuff. And so a lot of these guys are former military, and it's kind of unless you're used to that kind of like law enforcement military type, bosses or people around you, it can be difficult to kind of just go into it. And so I was a perfect fit for that role, having just been in the military and then having a communications background. And so I went in. So my first job was, mainly social media and, you know, any kind of digital media that they needed done. I would do that kind of stuff. And it was a fun job. I did that for like 2 years. And then that led me, I kind of decided I want to get out of the state agency kind of world. And then I got a job at Dell Computers within their business services as a business consultant, digital media business consultant. And essentially within the services division of Dell, you could, if you bought like say, 1,000 computers for your company or whatever, and you use Dell and you're in their system, then they kind of say, oh, hey, by the way, we have this business, consulting side too. Since you already are in the system, it's easy to kind of like work up, whatever you need done. And so it was a small group of us, and I was at Dell for I think 4 years, and I mainly worked from home in that time frame. After Dell, I got a job at a startup as a branding person, brand strategy person for like 2 or 3 months, and then the startup kind of went under. And at that point, I was like, okay, Old Enfield was getting pretty close to being, like, launching it, and so I was like, I'm just going to go full time with Old Enfield.
Fantastic. So before we go into the story of how you launched, why don't you give us a brief overview of what Old Enfield is? So if somebody would just hearing about it the first time, maybe give us an idea of what you guys do and what the brand means.
Cool. So Old Enfield it's a lifestyle brand, and what we primarily make is travel goods or travel bags and accessories right now. And so we make duffel bags of 2 different sizes, tote bags and dop kits, and then we also have like hats and stuff. But it's mainly right now travel bags and accessories. The style of Old Enfield is very much like a kind of a Filson-y wax canvas. I call it a heritage style. It's that kind of old school wax canvas. It's simplicity, durable materials, wax canvas and nylon, and it's durable materials that's made to last, made to weather the elements. And I like to think that people that buy my bags can pass them down to multiple generations because they'll last that long.
I wish I would have actually known of you before our honeymoon. We went to Africa. Fantastic. Did safari both in Kenya and Tanzania through the Serengeti.
Oh, cool.
But so you can only bring duffels.
Oh.
Can't bring hard-sided bags. You also have extreme low weight limits. And I'm a photographer, videographer. It's difficult. So basically I used up all my weight and I think a little bit of my wife's weight just with equipment. But searching for a duffel that it's going to have to last for 16 days, throwing it around a lot. Plus you're like, I'm photographer and videographer. So I want it to look cool, right? So I did way too much searching on the internet and all this. And I ended up just doing a normal canvas bag that wasn't sexy at all. But it was a difficult process because I have all this luggage.
Yeah.
But a travel duffel is a different deal.
Yeah.
Whole different world. Okay. So working at Dell.
Yeah.
Getting paid a bi-weekly paycheck or however they pay. A real paycheck all the time.
Exactly.
What made you pull the trigger to go out on your own?
Oh man. Well, so, I felt like kind of the stars were aligned in a way, the startup so Dell didn't the startup, but everything just kind of like was just like the stars were aligned. I was ready to go with Old Enfield, and it was kind of scary to be like, okay, now I'm going on my own with this. But I decided, you know what, right now is the time, and I can't think of an excuse to not do it. Or I could think of actually plenty of excuses to not do it, but I try to put those in the back of my head, like the fears of not doing it. Or the fears of doing it, and when it fails, how I'm gonna all those types of thoughts. I kind of just put it in the back of my head and said, you know what, this is something I felt very, I was passionate about it. It was right, it felt right. And it was really, um, I felt very confident in its success. So I was just like, all right, here we go.
Do you have any like recommendations for somebody that's on the cusp like that? Because I feel like I've talked with a lot of friends and family that always want to do that stuff, have ideas, but never jump off the cliff.
Right.
Any recommendations or ideas there for some people?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you feel very confident in what you're kind of working on or potentially going to start, if you feel very confident in it, that's the main thing right there. I would say is, really kind of take a step back for a second and say, all right, I think it's a good idea. I'm confident in it. And then, kind of prepare yourself. Okay, is it going to be maybe maybe a period of time where it's going to be a little tight, but if at that point and you still feel very confident about it and okay, I can deal with a little, cutting back a little bit and, really, investing myself in this and going all in. It just honestly, it's a matter of put those fears away that you may have and say, this is the right time to do it. This is the right time to do it. And you'll internally know that, okay, this is the right time to do it. So, you just got to put those other fears away and be like, all right, here I go.
I completely agree. What about money? Did you think that was it a point where you said, okay, I got enough to live for a while? Because to me, it sounds like Dell was starting to either dwindle out or that career was going to go through a shift anyway. So that's always a nice little push. Right. So then a lot of times money is always a concern for people. Like, I don't know, was there a thought process there where, hey, I'll be good for 3 months type of thing or something like that? Was there any of that? I'm just trying to get some value out of some people that want to start their company. Right.
Yeah. No, I did have a nest kind of saved up. And so that was also part of I have this, nest saved up and, based on what I need right now and going forward, this will, get me through however much time that nest will project you to get through, as well as living, in the kind of the great thing about being an entrepreneur now is that you can take on jobs like Uber, there's these kind of things there's many things that you can do to supplement maybe some bills or some grocery pays, and Uber and all these other different types of just, all right, I'm going to sign in and drive and especially if you're working from home, starting this up, and you can find the time, eventually, if not at first, because you're just grinding to get everything just going because you really want to get it going. But eventually you'll be able to find that time to, okay, now I can do this.
I think it's a great value add that we have nowadays is literally you could say, all right, I could do a part-time job like Uber anytime I need to do. If I need an extra $200,
mm-hmm.
my marketing company, Gabato, I hire a lot of photographers and videographers part-time because I also hire them for videography and photography, but I'll hire them to do like admin work, spreadsheet work for clients, low-end stuff, just for extra income for them. Because as you know, when you get on your own, it's the revenue is in waves.
Yeah, exactly.
It's difficult sometimes to get enough at all times. Talk to me about sewing, because reading about your story, you're a sewer.
Right. So I'm a self-taught sewer. And to back up about, a few years, or about 4 or 5 years ago when I was working at Dell, again, I was working at home. And if I found some time to myself or, really a lot of times I would, in the evenings or during my free times, I would still be, kind of just at the house and kind of restless. And I'm someone who likes to be doing something or learning how to do something. And I decided I was going to teach myself how to sew. One of the reasons how I got to that point is that I love gear. I love outdoor gear. I love bags and like harnesses or vests or, being in the Marines, we'd have like gear, and all this stuff. And it's kind of, I loved having all that kind of stuff, but I would also love to go to REI and I could go to REI and like feel around the different materials, and I would spend like hours in the backpack section, just, feeling the different materials, seeing what this is made out of, seeing what this is made out of. And one of the things I would do is it was kind of a fun exercise that I was doing on my own before I even started learning how to sew. And I was like, okay, I really like this stuff. So, but what I would do is I'd get like 3 of the 75-liter bags, like the big hiking packs. And so, say you have like 3 different brands, top brands, making these bags that they carry the same amount of gear, but and they're all the same lightweight, same amount of gear, but to a hiker, like a true, like, I'm going hiking. This bag is going to be on me for 3 weeks, and it has to be perfect. I'm going to be living out of it. It's going to be on me. And so, to a true hiker, they're going to look at those 3 bags, and there's going to be some small element that's going to make this bag better than this bag, better than this bag. And it's usually in these small little details. Like maybe it has pockets on the hip belt, or maybe it has some kind of, D-rings right here where you can hang your, it's just like little bitty detail, like having a D-ring right here or pockets here or something that's going to make this bag stand out to you as opposed to the other bags. And somebody else would come around and look and say, I like this bag better than this one. It was kind of fun finding those little details of design that would attract to a certain person to be like, okay, this is what I need because I like this. And I would do that. I would, again, I'd just go to REI and just look at the packs, see how they're made, see what's different about this pack and this pack. And so I realized, okay, I really love this stuff. I've always known I love stuff, but I realized, okay, I want to like do this. I want to like figure out how to do this. And so I was like, I guess I need to learn how to sew. And so I went on eBay. I bought like this industrial sewing machine. And my mom and my grandmother grew up sewing their own clothes. Like my mom probably could have been a clothing designer if she really wanted to, because she was doing it basically your entire life. So I invited my mom and my grandmother over, and I was like, how do I work this thing? Like, how do I get I didn't know anything about it.
They're very intimidating. We have a couple sewing machines here. My wife likes to sew. So yeah, you're like, oh man, this is actually kind of intense.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny when I first got it. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, it's here. Sewing machine's here. I got all this thread, and I got some went to Joanne Fabrics, got some fabric, and I was like, all right, cool. And I got this, and I was like, and I think it sat there for like maybe 4 months before I even okay, I'm doing this now. You know what I mean? And so, I brought my mom and my grandmother over, and they taught me the basics of how to, how to thread it, and some very basics, because they were also like, we'd never done bags, so that's kind of beyond us. But they taught me the basics of sewing, and then kind of YouTube kind of took care of the rest. I'd go watch videos, and I would try something, and I would just, it eventually got to the point to where I was pretty good at it. And I was working on this hunting and fishing vest was my original idea I was working on, and I eventually got that. So I was learning how to sew. I was working on this hunting fishing vest, and I eventually got to a place to where, all right, I can't make this any better. And so I thought, I'm going to go ahead and find a manufacturer to prototype the rest of it for me. And so I found this manufacturer in North Carolina and started working with him on this vest to prototype. And once I got rid of that, or once I moved that project onto the manufacturer, and also I wasn't having any intention of really maybe making this with the manufacturer. I just, one of the things he did was prototype. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna get this guy to prototype it. And so at that point, I didn't have anything else to work on. The vest was my entirety of my sewing projects. And then so I got a pattern for backpacks and in duffel bags. And so I just kind of started, okay, I'm gonna start making the backpacks and duffel bags that I've kind of been wanting to make since I've started. And by this point, I was pretty good at sewing, and I was playing with different types of materials, wax canvases, nylons. And
have you done a pattern before, or was this your first patterns? Because that sounds like a harder place to start.
Yeah. So I had to get the patterns for this at first, and that's kind of where I started. When I was doing the vest, it was just totally like in my head, and I was like,
wow,
make it
tough.
up. Yeah, it was actually it was a tough process because I didn't know how the process of sewing worked. And it kind of, it's funny, it made me look. So I'd get fabric and I'd lay it out, and in my head, I knew what I wanted to look like. Mm-hmm. And so I started sewing it. And then once I got towards the end, I realized, oh man, I had to do this as first or second step. And I would have to go and I would take the entire thing apart, and I would start from scratch. And so
did the vest fit you when you were done?
yeah, the vest didn't actually only fit me. I would have someone else come, hey, come check out this vest. I'm like, oh, I was like, oh man, I made that specifically for myself.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
funny, you know?
Oh, a lot of times it'll be slightly too big because a lot of times you'll. That's what happens to my wife when she tries to make something. A lot of times it's like slightly too big.
Yeah,
because I think you're leaving room for error or something. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I got to the point where I was not working on the vest anymore. I was working on these duffel bags, and I had the patterns for them, and I was working on them. And at the same time, I was working to get an actual like legitimacy to the business. I was like thinking, okay, this is kind of cool. I want to like at least start this out as I'm going to go ahead and get the LLC going and DBA going and all that stuff. And
make it real. Right?
Yeah, make it real, or at least be like, okay, the idea that it could become real, kind of thing. And so I got that going, and I asked my friends, like, hey, I'm making these duffel bags now. Who wants a duffel bag? And here's some options, some colors that you can kind of pick from. They all kind of picked the same bag. I was like, cool. And like 5 of them, were like, I want a bag. And so I was like, great. I ordered all this fabric for a bunch of fabric and a bunch of materials and webbing to make these 5 bags. And I got it all in. And I was like looking at it. I was like, oh man, this is going to be tough. I didn't realize how tough it would be to make all these 5 bags. Because at the time it took me like maybe 2 weeks just to make one. Because I was still just not a very good, I was better at sewing. I was like good at a point where I feel like I confident enough to where I will sell these bags to my friends and be like, all right, cool. But it still would take me like 2 weeks to make a bag. And I was just like, oh man. So after that process, I was like, okay, if I'm going to go at this, I need to go at this with the manufacturer. I had this idea that I make them myself and sell them. And I was like, well, okay, that's just way too much. And so that kind of started the process of, I went to my manufacturer who's making the vest for me, prototype. And I was like, hey, by the way, I've been doing these duffel bags. You guys manufacture them? He's like, yeah, sure. And so that started at that point where I was like, hey, can you do these duffel bags to my manufacturer? That's about the point where those corporate gigs were kind of dwindling down. And about the time, we had the prototypes done and everything ready to go to production, that's about the time when I said, okay, this is all the stars are aligned. It's time to go forward with this.
So talk to me about prototyping first, and then I think we'll get into the whole manufacturing and all that process, because I have some experience with this and some negative experiences as well as positives. Maybe some recommendations or some lessons learned around when you have this bag and pattern creation, prototyping. Like, talk to me about that a little bit, as in what you wish you would have learned, what you know now, some recommendations for somebody who would like to start that process, how to find one, anywhere that you would like to provide some value there.
Cool. Yeah. So, if you're designing in, so for someone in my what I do, they can approach the design and development of a bag in kind of 2 different ways. One is that they know how to sew, or even if they know how to sew, they prefer maybe not to sew a design prototype. And they just sketch it out, and then they send these sketch, or they do like a digital render, like a CAD file, CAD file, all that stuff. And either somebody who can do it, or you can do it yourself, or maybe you pay somebody to do it, or whatever it is. And send that out. So you can do it 2 ways. The way I do it is I will have an idea, and at first I sew it out first, and it's usually 2 or 3 runs on my end to kind of get where I like it. And at that point, what I've learned in that process is also not to be too much a perfectionist with that prototype, in the sense of like, I want it to be exactly, perfectionist in the sense of it's going to change a few different in these either slightly, or it could change a lot in the process of you handing over the patterns and the prototype to your manufacturer to get their prototype going.
But you're almost kind of like giving them a very good representation of what you want, but not exact representation, right?
Exactly.
Because there's going to be some back and forth. We do this a lot in the design world. And I always tell people, Like, don't spend a crazy amount of time in the first draft because it's not where you're going to be anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
We're just trying to get back and forth here started. So the way we can, it's much easier to discuss when you have either something physical or visual, as opposed to just trying to tell a story or something
Right.
But anyway, continue.
No, you're absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct because I learned that if I'm trying to be perfect with that first run, it's going to take me months and months and months and wasted effort. And so I just kind of get a visual representation of what I want and a pattern. Then my manufacturer requires a paper pattern. Uh, if I have a bag already done, then he will ask for the pattern. And so I stopped trying to make that first run perfect, and I send it up to him and say, hey, this is what I'm going for. And sometimes I even send like maybe if there's some inspiration behind it, some pictures or whatever of the inspiration, and this is what I've made, and these are the kind of size dimensions, and these are the reasons why it's like this. And then I always tell him, change it up in ways. If you need to change it up in certain ways in order to make it a more easily manufactured kind of, make the manufacture process easier. Because I may not have made something on the bag that's, if as a manufacturer looking at like, oh, well, that, it's going to take like an extra day to do, or, just because of this and take an extra day, or the process, or if you were to change this slightly, then the manufacturing process would be a lot easier and be less expensive and everything like that. And so I always tell them like, hey, change it up where need be for manufacturing to optimize the manufacturing process. And so that's always the first, change. And then he'll give me prototype, and sometimes it's off from even if I give them a, a visual or an actual prototype, and it's off here or there, because sometimes maybe I can't sew my skill level isn't quite, there to do certain types of like maybe gusseted pockets or something like that, to where I'm like, hey, we're going to make these gusseted, and then I get that first round back and it's way off because even they're gusseted, but that's not what I had in mind or whatever it is. But it always is going to change, and you can't be a perfectionist with that first run, and understand that what you are doing really is you're just creating the conversation flow with you and your manufacturer on, you know, getting that going, getting that process going, getting that conversation going. And then, so getting bogged down at that first step is hard sometimes because you want it to be perfect. But you have to realize like it's going to change, and it's better to just get it out the door and then start working on a process to get the prototype right for a line, for the manufacturer line.
Yeah. So how many back and forth, I guess you call them prototypes or drafts or whatever you want to call them, is common to launch a new product for you?
Well, so the one advantage of being able to sew, and I do kind of hand them, what I want or what I'm going for. It's usually 2 back and forths. I would say if you hand over a piece of paper with a sketch and like, this is what I'm going for, it's probably going to be like 4 or 5 maybe back and forths. And so that's the one advantage I have with sewing. It's 2 usually. And sometimes, like I said, like if I'm doing, like I have had it to where I got the first prototype back from my manufacturer. I was like, okay, this was way off than what I was going for. And I actually put it on the back burner. I was like, I don't have time to do 2 or 3 more back and forths right now. I'm going to come back to this product a little later. And when I can actually dedicate more time with this design process, because when I'm working on something else here, I'm like, okay, I gotta put that on the back burner. I was making these briefcases, for example, and that's what it was. And I wanted to have them out for winter, with the winter line. I did new products being tote bags and briefcases, but the tote bags I got back, first one, pretty much I was like, hey, just move the label here and we're good. Wow. And so the next one he came over with it was label was moved, and that was that. But the briefcase was just way off, and I didn't prepare him well enough for that one too. That was my fault. I didn't give him a good representation of what I was kind of going for, and I changed it up a few times. The briefcase is a difficult one where it's like it's very specific to the person who's going to buy it. They want this many amount of pockets, or they don't want any pockets, or they need this type of envelope sleeve in the back that can hold this amount of paper or whatever it is. It's very specific to a person. So I kind of was like, all right, I'm going to put that briefcase on the back burner because this can be 2 or 3 more back and forth that I don't have time to do right now.
So it sounds like the ability to sew saves you, sounds like about half price on your prototyping, right?
Yes, it does.
So if somebody wanted to start the prototyping process, what kind of a budget do you recommend them to just one product?
One product, I would recommend about average $1,500 if you're going to be doing 3. That's about 3 back and forths.
Yeah, we spent more than that on a swimsuit, but then I think we weren't prepared. There was a lot of learning cost in there. So all right, you got. So it sounds like you're well versed in the manufacturing process, prototyping, you're sewing. Talk to me about like, okay, you're going to launch a company here, and we're going to sell these things. Like, how did you do that, and how do you do it?
Well, so yeah, that's also the like part where it kind of comes just after you decide to go full in with it, and you're like, okay, now I got to, present this in a way that's going to be, the style you're going for, the look, the feel, the aesthetics of the character of the company, the brand. So that's where my background actually was beneficial to me personally, because my background is in communications. I did some social media. I'm not great at it, but I did some social media, digital business strategy, and branding. So I kind of was able to take, kind of my background, and that helped me out a lot with Old Enfield because I knew exactly what I was going for in the style, and I knew kind of how to bring that to life with the website and the wording, the copyright, and everything, or the wording on the website and everything. But it is a difficult process because it also is actually, I had that background, but it's also sometimes difficult for me to do it for myself. If I'm going to write a bio or something, it's like, how do I write a bio for myself? It's like, or if I'm going to do something, I found that I was very invested with, being so invested with, going forward with Old Enfield and having a very clear idea of what I wanted. I found it difficult for me to actually sometimes accomplish that. So I would hire some creative help, and with photography and with creative direction here and there. But for the most part, I had it pretty well, in my head, and I was able to get it to where I was, bring it to life in the style, in the look that I wanted to. However, I think that that's an extremely important part when you're first starting out like this. And I actually, my first photo shoot was a big photo shoot. It was all day. We went out to Fredericksburg, and and I had, photographer assistant, videographer assistant. And it was the biggest budget item I basically had done to that point, almost, besides the actual lines. And I think it was completely worth it because that was just the foundation to where, where I was going, where I wanted. And a lot of people, and also within the product shots, I spent a lot of money on product shots for that time. And I think that was extremely important because a lot of people think, okay, I got the product, I got the website up, I got the the wording's great, and but they'll think, okay, I can kind of go a little lower budget on the photos maybe, and maybe I'm thinking I can take it with my iPhone, or I can at one point I even was like, I can just get a white sheet and put it in the backdrop, and I can just put my product on a white table and take photos. And I tried that first. I was like, this looks horrible,
Yeah, man, you're preaching the choir here of being a photographer myself, a videographer. How did it feel when you were out on that photo shoot? Like, was that like a prideful moment? Because it made it really real, huh?
It was really cool because all these people came together, even though, I was paying for them all to come together, but all these people were coming together with the one kind of objective to, based on this vision that I'd started a few years ago. And it was fun, and it was cool, and it was very kind of proud moment and everything to get it. It felt very real. And then when I got the photos back and I put them on the website, and I was like, man, this looks great. This is exactly what I was going for. And, so not only it felt great, but it was exactly what I wanted. It was really that first step to really is a confidence booster, and it was a first step to like, I am on the right page. I'm on the right track here.
Yeah, it's almost good that you weren't good at the photography yourself, because then you might have kept going and not had that feeling of that. It is when you have a whole crew there, and everybody has these great ideas and they get excited and you have these cool products. It's a lot of fun. Well, tell me about your first sale, like a real one, non-friend, like online. And you just sell online, is that correct? Or do you have brick and mortars?
Yeah, I've done a few stores. I've been either in a few stores or here or there. I was in Huckberry for a while, which it's a big retailer out of San Francisco that does online retail. And that was a big deal for me to be in Huckberry, because I've always kind of modeled, or I've always kind of wanted to be, I've always followed them regardless, before I even started Old Enfield. But so that was a place you could buy it, here and there, shops. I haven't done a big push into wholesale, but essentially, yes, it's online. On my website is primarily where you're going to buy it. And the first sale, yeah, that was kind of cool. And not friend. I'm looking back on it, and I can't. Oh, actually, I do remember. And they bought like 3 bags. I was like, what? And at first, I thought I had to have known this person. But maybe they somehow knew me, but I didn't know them. They're in Houston, I think. And I thought that was like just amazing. And speaking of like also looking at sales, it's great to see sales come from like different states. I'm like, oh, okay, just another check off the box. Arizona got me, or whatever. Or like, I think at this point, all 50 states have purchased bags. Someone from all 50 states has purchased a bag, which is cool, and or a product. Maybe it's just a hat or something, but that was also really cool to see the kind of how it evolved with sales, and people in like Brooklyn buying my bag, and people in San Francisco buying my bag, and then people in Wisconsin, Washington State, and then the South and Southeast is actually really big. Is my Texas in the South and the Southeast are kind of my main markets, and because the stuff is one of my products has like that old school camo, and it's very it is pretty popular right now, but it's really popular in the Southeast, and that like kind of hunting. I'd say my primary customer is 25 to 45 in Texas or in the Southeast. But again, I get a lot of Northeast, and also some random ones. I think Pennsylvania or something is like randomly has bought a lot of bags. I was doing some analytics the other day. I was like, man, wow. Or like Indiana. I was like, wow, Indiana. I didn't even notice that they bought so much, like people from that state were buying so much of my stuff. I was like, wow, okay, that's kind of cool.
With being a veteran, do you think that there's any positives there with your company and your branding and all that?
Yeah, branding, well, with branding, I didn't want it to, when I kind of was approaching the brand style and feel of it, there are a lot of veteran owned companies that they're very veteran forward, I would say, in terms of the look and feel of the character of the company. And a lot of times that also is they kind of sell to the veteran community, and or people that like that kind of stuff. I can say t-shirts with like kind of slogans of veterans, or it's not always t-shirts, and I think those are great companies. But when I was making mine, I wanted it to be, again, the look and feel of this heritage kind of style company. But then I wanted to also be, and I'm a veteran, and and that's kind of just plays into the story, as opposed to being the lead focus of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always kind of how I approached it. It's also a veteran owned company, and and part of my story is being a veteran in the gear I used and places I've been, and as part of it, and it's kind of part of the experience what led me here. But this is what I'm presenting, and it's more of a heritage kind of line as opposed to a veteran forward line or a company brand. And so, but it does, so in a branding way, in a marketing way, yes, that is it does help. And in other things, there's also I get sometimes I get attention because of that. And even though it's not the forward thing, that's why maybe somebody will approach me to do a collaboration or to do this or that. And then in terms of, also another thing too is actually my manufacturer in North Carolina is a veteran too. And so it's actually, that's the reason why I use that manufacturer. So technically my bags, like I say, they're veteran designed in Austin and veteran made in North Carolina.
It's a great little community there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fun. I mean, thank you for your service for one.
Thanks.
Talk to me about the name. So we live where we're recording this here. Enfield Road is like down the street, and we were chatting before. And you said you grew up in the Tarrytown area where we're at right now. Does that have any? Is it part of the? Tell me about the name.
Yeah, it does. So the name Old Enfield is, for anyone not familiar with Austin, it is actually a neighborhood in Austin, in West Austin. It's a small neighborhood. It's right off Enfield Road, but the neighborhood's called Old Enfield. It's right off Enfield Road. And it's not the neighborhood I grew up in. I grew up just, right next to it. And it's a West Austin neighborhood. I grew up in West Austin. They're very close to each other, and there's really not much difference when it comes down to it. But, when I was thinking of names, I had a thesaurus up and a dictionary up, and I was like trying to think of all these crazy, not crazy, but I was really trying to, basically at first I was really putting a lot of effort into the name and trying to think of something. And then all of a sudden Old Enfield just kind of clicked. And I was like, there you go. What I like about Old Enfield is that if you are familiar with Austin or from Austin, Enfield or Old Enfield will remind you of the street or the neighborhood. And so it has that kind of like shout out to Austin. It has that like recognition to Austin, but if you're not from Austin, it's not so unique to where it's like, what are they trying to say by Enfield? A lot of people will ask me like, oh, like the rifle or there's a British company called Enfield Rifles. And then there's another British company called Royal Enfield motorcycles. They're very like old school, like
perfect.
Old, yeah, you know what I mean? Like the rifles, I think were like, pre-World War II, and then they used them through World War II. The motorcycles, there's one of the oldest, motorcycle manufacturers, I think, out of the UK. And so it has like this old school British feel to it. And that, Enfield itself has an old school British feel, Old Enfield, kind of, again, old school, So it kind of it has everything I was kind of going for, a kind of nod to Austin, but it also took on the heritage kind of style that I was going for with my bags and the character of the brand that I wanted to present. And again, so like just that old school British kind of heritage wax canvas, kind of stuff
just goes all together. So my wife, now we live here, but when I met her, she lived on Enfield Road in Exposition in that area. There's a little old apartment complex. Yeah. Her and like 5 other friends all had little 1-bedroom apartments. We called it Melrose because it was like pretty kind of fantastic situation to have a bunch of friends live in the same little complex. But yeah. So what does the future hold for you and Old Enfield Supply Company?
So, for me, it's continuation with Old Enfield, really going, continuing to drive it and continuing to grow it and to remind myself to, again, not kind of have those fears, because those fears sometimes come back later on. And it's like, oh, now I'm actually being kind of successful with this. I don't want to mess it up. Or now I'm, it's kind of, again, you have to like be a little, you got to kind of push away those fears too sometimes going forward. Like, other things come up in terms of, now you're looking at real business stuff and you're really looking at profits and losses and you're looking at forecasts and you're looking at all this stuff, as opposed to at first you're just trying to get that business out there. So on my end, it's continuing, the growth of Enfield while also, trying not to allow those fears again, or new fears, to come up and bog me down. In terms of Old Enfield, so right now we do travel bags and accessories. One of the future, like what I really kind of see Old Enfield going into is more everyday product, not just more everyday products, still being a base of travel and accessories, travel bags, accessories, but going into more everyday products. I mentioned like the briefcase. I mentioned the tote bag was kind of one of the first elements of everyday stuff. I mean, even though a tote bag can be either or, it was also the first female oriented product I've come out with. And so um, going forward with Old Enfield, it will probably, be more everyday stuff, backpacks, briefcases, but also the travel stuff. And as well as getting more into hunting and fishing kind of gear as well. I foresee Old Enfield, we're still in a kind of an infancy of the company, and going forward, I like to think, I'll have like I envision it being, a brick and mortar, kind of headquarters somewhere in Austin. That's kind of a cool place.
Maybe on Enfield Road.
Yeah, maybe on Enfield Road, right? That'd be kind of cool. I got to find some business areas there, right?
It's getting more expensive, unfortunately. Enfield Road is it's definitely a great place of town here in Austin. So what does success look like for you?
Success looks like now as the same as it does when I first started. And I've always, I want my goal personally was, I'm not trying to, become like extremely wealthy off this or anything. Or, well, I've always said I want to do something I'm passionate about, that I like doing, that's mine, and that will provide. And so that's what success looks like for me. And so continuing to be able to provide, doing something that I want to do, that I'm passionate about, and that is also something of my own creation to an extent, is what I consider personal success.
So any mentors or books or anything that kind of has guided you along this path?
Yeah, I've had actually plenty of mentors. I've actually had a lot of mentors through friends. People kind of just say, hey, you should talk to this guy, or this person, whatever it is. Their background may be very close to what I'm doing, or their background may just be entrepreneurship or something, or business, or they, in some extent, I've had a lot of mentors, and also kind of I got into this space of the outdoor industry, kind of lifestyle brands. All of a sudden, you're kind of a part of the group now. And so, like, oh, you're the Old Enfield guy. Yeah, that's, my company. And then so, hey, then you start talking to them, or, we do this, and you kind of become part of this community. So I've gotten mentored from, people in the industry, and then also people that are just generally entrepreneurs. Can't really relate to exactly to like a book or something that I read. I was like, okay, that's, that was very helpful, but it's been a lot of just connecting with people and talking with them and learning about their experience, and how best to approach either starting a company or starting a company that's also in the outdoor industry.
Is there anything that you wish you would have known when you started that you might know now?
Well, yeah, there's a few things, and they're little things that are like, the very business sides of things, where it's like, okay, my background isn't in business, or, I've been learning that process. But yeah, there are certain things here and there where it's just like, oh, okay, I should have been accounting for this maybe the entire time, or like, okay, I probably, it's like certain, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of little things that I maybe wasn't accounting for at first, but now I'm like, okay, I need to account for that now, and track it and monitor it and everything. So if you're not big on the business side of it, things, I would say when you're first going into it, say you're creative with branding down, and you got, product down, I would say put a little more time and effort into that business side.
Yeah. I completely agree. So, has your, let's talk about like when you were growing up and all this, has your life turned out kind of the way that you thought it would?
In a way, I mean, I'd say like since I've started Old Enfield, yeah, I would say it has probably turned out kind of the way I was expecting it to.
Mm-hmm.
But, 10 years ago, if somebody would have come back and said, hey, this is what we're going to be doing, before I even learned how to sew, before I had the idea, before any of this stuff, I'd been like, you're crazy. There's no way. I don't even know how to sew. How would I get into this? So it's kind of funny how it has turned in that way. Because I would have never thought that I'd be doing basically what I'm doing now, say 10 years ago. because it's just like mind boggling to think, oh, I'm going to learn how to sew, do all this stuff, start a company, do this, and be in this brand, be in this, I always wanted to do something creative on my own and start something, but I would never thought it would have been this. Even though it's not the biggest shocker because I've always been very passionate about all this stuff. But it's still, I never thought I would be in this space. Like I am.
It is interesting. So any advice that you'd give someone wanting to enter the world of like apparel or, anything kind of in the retail space, I suppose, or manufacture, anything in your areas?
Yeah, I would say, once I would say probably, again, don't get bogged down on being a perfectionist with your initial designs. I would say, getting something out there is the most important one. Like that first step of contacting the manufacturer, finding a manufacturer, contacting the manufacturer, and then getting a first run going or first prototype going. I think that step is the hardest. I think for somebody in this apparel or kind of space where you have the idea, you know what you're kind of going for, but it's getting into like that first step of, okay, I'm going to move forward in this. And it also kind of gets rid of any kind of jitters that you may have of like, I don't know how to talk to manufacturers. I don't know what I'm actually looking for. I'm just starting this. But for the most part, the manufacturers know if you're like just starting out, it's like, okay, it's fine. If you just want to scribble a design on a piece of paper on the back of a napkin, send that to me and we'll get started with that. And a lot of times that's what manufacturer prototypers can work with, and making, not being like so kind of like overwhelmed and kind of scared and this daunting task of a line and a design. And it's really, I think because if it's in your head, you know what you want to go for. The first step of just contacting somebody saying, hey, let's get a prototype going. Can you do that? What's, just that first step, and then contracting that first prototype out. And once you get that first prototype back, or that first prototype is perfect wherever I'd say it's 2 or 3 runs of prototyping, and you get that first bag back that's like, and you're like, wow, this is exactly what I was going for. And it's a really cool feeling to go from there to there. And that's that first step that's really difficult.
It's really cool because you have actually got like this real product too. You can see it, touch it, feel it.
Right.
That's got to be a great feeling. And you've mentioned YouTube before, which I've loved to learn things. Any other like resources that you would recommend to help people kind of in this process? Or just keep practicing.
Like I said, YouTube, and there was some, learning about fabrics was difficult. And the other thing too, in the world of manufacturing, and whether it's either apparel or, if you're going from a textiles company that's selling the fabric to the manufacturer, that entire process, usually the companies are kind of antiquated. They're kind of older. There's not a lot of companies that are really easy that you can just go on their website and maybe click add to cart. And then, there's really few of those companies. A lot of times it's, there's a rep, you email them, you email your order. I want 50 yards of this, want 50 yards of that. So it's a very that's a difficult part to kind of get started, because it's hard to find these. Like, where do I find these people? Where do I, there are resources, like there's a resource called Maker's Row that I used. It's an online resource that actually puts designers and manufacturers and everything together. And so I used that at first, but then I used Maker's Row and what else? Anyway, it's a difficult process to get going. But once you get going and you kind of get those contacts and you understand how it works, and so.
What about fabric? How do you find fabric? How do you decide what fabric to use? Like, walk me through that.
Well, that's again something that you're going to put a lot of research into. Unless, like, I knew I wanted wax canvas and nylon, but still, in that, just saying wax canvas and nylon, there's so many different options. So what weight, and then dye, because every manufacturer, it's kind of funny that if I went brushed brown wax canvas and I wanted in an 18-ounce weight, or I wanted in a 20-ounce weight, the colors are way off. Sometimes, like, they're not, like, something about the dye process, anyway. So I learned a lot about fabric in that entire process, but I learned all of this also in my initial stages of learning how to sew. So really, one of the biggest benefits I had was learning how to sew, because in that process, I learned about fabric and weight and where to get it, and how it reacts with other fabrics and weights. And so in that initial process of when I didn't have a clue of what I was doing, but I was just putting fabric underneath the sewing machine and going with it. That process was the most beneficial because since I knew nothing, I had to learn it all. And so I learned all about fabrics. I learned all about, hardware and, the entire, every bit of it.
What about routines? So you have kind of a lot going on. You gotta design new products. You gotta deal with the business side. You gotta do some analytics and some sales. Do you have any kind of consistent or constant routines that you do on a regular basis that is helpful for you?
Yeah, I try to break down my days in times of days and where I'm most productive doing what. Usually, like, what do I do? And my personal kind of routine is in the mornings, I'm usually more productive with design work. I'll maybe check my emails, and then after I check my emails, if there's anything immediate I need to send out, I send it out. Or I do initial emails, send out initial emails in the morning, first thing, and then I go into design work for a few hours. And I got kind of broken down by the times. And at about 2:00 ish is when I usually stop doing design work, and then I start doing more business related stuff. And essentially my morning time is my creative time, whether it's either writing something for the website or for Instagram or for product description, where I want to try to be more creative. That's kind of my creative time. And then the later part of the day is my kind of time that I have to look at numbers and analytics and research or whatever. And then, so that's how I kind of have to break down my day.
Yeah, I like that you block it out a little bit as opposed to just free flow, right? And sometimes you get caught up in never getting the design work done because that's something that isn't not immediate typically. That's your future forward stuff. What would you title this chapter of your life?
Beginnings.
Love it. And last question, how would you like to be remembered?
Honestly, I'd like to be remembered as kind of someone who didn't let to be bogged down, like fears didn't for whatever, joining the Marine Corps, for not allowing, fears to stop them from creating something that they wanted to do or something they felt passionate about. So kind of, I guess, just remembered for, going forward and doing something that is kind of different, but it takes a little more courage, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. No, it makes complete sense. Well, yeah, really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, man.
Cheers, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.